like getting your food. A psychological experiment on you.
Yeah.
Now you did the psychological experiment on yourselves. Because the coffee that was out there was the regular BPC.
Yeah.
But that coffee there is the real.
That coffee is the real coffee, the strong one. Why I like Arabica coffee, it's what I'm used to because that's the one you get in Africa, the Arabica, not the one that you get from Colombia. So we are so blessed that Linda McEwen, where's Linda McEwen? Linda McEwen, I got it right this time.
Standing next to Linda McEwen.
And Spiros, where are you, Spiros? And so Spiros is like the outgoing gregarious guy that has this entire party of people at Pete's Coffee on a Sunday morning. And so Linda would go to every day. And so Linda would go there and drink coffee with Spiros, and then Ellen and Kurt would go. And then Linda and Ellen met, and Linda heard the story. And she immediately emailed me and said, Roche, you have to hear the story. And this is like a Thursday. I watched Linda, that afternoon, Ellen gets the DVD to my house. I watch it. We meet on like the Tuesday. The next Monday, worship already says, we're going to do it. We're going to show it during worship. And so thank you. Tell Catherine and worship team thank you for doing this. This is not something we've typically done. And so without much further ado, I want to present to you Ellen and Kurt. Thank you for being here. You're coming back all the way from New Jersey. There's more videos to buy. How much are they?
$20.
$20 for the video and
$10
music.
for CD music.
If you want it, you can just pay me while they talk.
Says Mike.
That's true.
So, good morning.
Good morning.
And peace to everybody, and thank you so much for having us and for allowing us to share this beautiful story with you. And all of your enthusiasm is incredibly exciting for us. So, thank you so much for coming. So a lot of times what we like to do at this point is kind of open the floors that people have. There's a lot that we could talk about, we could tell you. Maybe what I'll do is actually start by telling you how we got involved in this story and then let you guys take off, because what's really interesting always to us is that there are so many different perspectives in groups, and it's important to address issues that are really important to you. So just to give you an idea of where we started with this, Kurt and I are married. We've been doing documentaries together since 1996, and through a lot of that time we've been to many sad places in the world. We were in Kosovo, for example, starting at the end of the war there. We saw some really horrific things. We were in other places that were very sad. We'd seen a lot of violence, and you know, at some point you get a little bit hopeless about the world and the future. And one day we were sitting at home and we were working, and we got a gift basket in the mail, and among the things that were in the gift basket was this little package, 1 ounce Mirembe Kawamura coffee with a little paragraph describing this peace initiative of the farmers. And we looked at it and we said, we have to do it. We have to focus on something that's happy and that's hopeful and that can make a change. And one of the things we've seen with this story, by the way, is that that's the spark that happens. You know, there are people who see it, who get it, who care, who really are ready to embrace it, to make it grow, to make that story grow to all of their communities, wherever those communities are. So that's how we felt when the story was presented to us. This was our opportunity to do something about it. We contacted the coffee company. Through them, we contacted the farmers. It took about 5 months to figure out. Remember, there is internet there, but it's not, you know, on everybody's laptop, which they don't have. They don't even have electricity, right? So, you know, it takes a while to go back and forth, and finally we got to the place where they said, okay, come. And that was the beginning of our story. They started in 2004, we started in 2005. So we've been working with them ever since. And most recently we were back in March of this year with a small group of people. The last few years we've been going back about every other year and taking a few people with us to experience what this is actually about. And we filmed some more because that production was actually 2010. A lot has happened since, and we're going to be updating it for TV release in 2014. So we were back filming for that. So that's kind of that was the genesis of the story. We fell in love with the story. We fell more in love with the story when we got there, with the farmers, with their efforts. Because to do something like this in a place where there are absolutely no resources, where the average age is around 50, where it's very hard to get by in a day-to-day way, and to put all of that aside and to find the strength and to find the energy to do something that's amazing and a great role model is incredibly inspirational to us. So that was kind of the beginning.
I just, Ellen said the age is 50. It's the life expectancy is 50. So
Right,
yeah, it's it's the one thing that struck me, and I've worked for PBS for years, and Ellen and I worked together for years. The thing about this story is it's visually, it's on the equator. It's, visually they have like 2 signs of seasons, wet and dry, and, it's like being in California, with the weather and just, I'd always wanted to go to Africa. I've been there in Rwanda in '94, covering a story with Doctors Without Borders, another sad story that I was covering with the Hutu-Tutsi issues going on in Rwanda, and came back, there's something about people in an agrarian setting, loving their land with their children and incorporating all these different desires, and it's all through these coffee beans and their plants that they're making. And so it was a wonderful thing to film, and I think we shot about 180 hours of material to get it down to what that was. And instead, some people go in and just do one shot. We've gone back and forth and back and forth. So I have a whole batch of new material now to add on to this 15 minutes to tell you the story. The next time will be what's happening 5 years afterwards. So, and it's interesting, and chocolate and vanilla now. I knew that would get rid of it.
How does global weather change affect them?
Okay, so this is a great question. So global weather change is definitely affecting them. Perfect example is that forever, rainy season started in around February, and around January they were planting, right? So it would rain in February, and all of a sudden last year, or the last number of years, it didn't rain in February, and it didn't rain in March, and it rained in April, which meant that their plants died, right? Because they had planted them earlier. So this is one example. The rains have also been totally erratic. When it comes, how hard it comes. So all of these things affect the farmers. It's this amazing story, by the way, but in the end of the day, it's all dependent on the crops, right? So if you have a drought, if you have flooding, it's over. That's all it'll take, is for, if the co-op doesn't work, if people aren't selling their beans, if they don't have beans to sell, then it's going to fall apart. So it's a very fragile story. So basically, the co-op was able to get a grant from a Dutch organization to hire an agronomist named J.B. Berengi, and he's Ugandan. He's trained in agronomy, and he's been at the co-op the last year or so. So we had a chance to meet with him, and he's been really working with the farmers to show them different ways of planting, even on a farm. Some issues are climate change issues, but some issues are also kind of not being educated about the best ways of planting. So for example, you need the wood to make the fire to cook your food. So if you cut down the trees and the coffee grows much better under the tree, after a while you don't have enough trees. So thinking about how to do all of that, he's put together like a model plot, and he takes farmers to the plot and says, here's how you should do things. If you plant here and it rains, now you've got this ditch, it's going to absorb the water so you don't have to worry about it. So anyway, it's an education at the same time as, it's really definitely helping the farmers. And by the way, I just want to add one little thing to that. JB, we spent all this time with him in March. We get back, and April, I get an email from a woman I know who's a physician in Chicago who had been, there are 2 women physicians in Chicago who had found this co-op and have spent some time there. And she sends an email saying, JB, the lower discs in his spine have gone out and he needs immediate, thank you, yum, thank you. He needs immediate surgery. And he was going to get spinal surgery in Uganda. The guy's around 30 years old. Spinal surgery in Uganda. Here's a whole co-op that's depending on this guy, JB, is really important, right? He's helping them to preserve what they've got going. And I read this and I said, really? You know, my brother went to the best spinal doctor in Manhattan and it didn't help. You know, so in Uganda, I don't know. So basically, one of these physicians ended up doing lots of research, and she found a group of doctors in San Diego who were going to Kenya to volunteer for a few weeks to do spinal surgeries. And she sent all the medical records of JB to these doctors, and they agreed to do the surgery. And he's now recovering, and he's much better. So I'm bringing it up as this point that, like, first of all, the interconnectedness of the entire world, right? I mean, and how much we can all help each other, and also just to say the importance of every person contributes, every person is a part of the bigger whole. You know, and the needs are vast. I mean, we come back each time, and I could go into a million stories.
There's more coffee.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. Who owns the land on which the coffee is grown, and does that influence the distribution of profits in the cooperative? And second, has the cooperative have the positive effect of reducing, for example, interfaith violence of the kind that they're seeing in Egypt right now, because of the bonds that are born in the cooperative across these 3 take lines?
Yeah.
Each farmer owns his own plot of land, and so the more you know, your plot of land not is only for your subsistence crops, but it's also for, you know, your cash crop coffee. So how they delegate, you might find somebody that's got, we have one farmer I know that has fields and fields of cassava, which is like a tapioca kind of root crop. So how they choose to do that, the land, I don't know how it originally was divvied up, but I know that you make the choice of how many you can plant, or you can eradicate your coffee if it gets something in it. But it's all based on individuals' farmers' ability to produce. And the more, there was one point when the coffee market crashed that everybody was killing their coffee plants because they wanted to plant something more productive. It's a very difficult plant to grow because it needs shade. It needs 5 years till it'll actually start.
Sure.
Yeah, until it'll even get like little flowers on it. It's a 5-year process, and so what you've knocked down now, because you're not making any money from, if you don't deal with it, you're gonna have 5 more years. So, but they've also so that is the one. The other one is you talked about trying to reduce the amount of
tension, violence, conflict.
JJ is such a magnet of a character that he has had the ability, I don't know if anybody else could have pulled it off but JJ. JJ's character of, he could walk in here right now with a guitar and we'd all feel like we've known him for 20 years. Or he would even not with a guitar, just his personality is just, there's something about this man that, I mean, he's just a wonderful, a bright shining light and a lot of people have been intimidated over it. Right now the biggest issues aren't within the co-op from, disruption, that kind of thing. It's the political scene that goes on within Uganda. There's a president who's been sitting for more years than I think even Roosevelt sat, and it ends up that every time somebody from an opposition party wants to stand and say, well, we need some other representation, then local thugs come in and start beating up people at polling places, and So it's not over religion, it's more over, I guess, the political, scene. If you choose to buck the system, you might well get,
But
by the system.
But I would also say that the whole idea of the co-op is to be a model for other places, starting locally. I mean, so one of the things that we wanted to do with the documentary, and we have done, I mean, it's screened in a film festival in Turkey. We don't go to all those different places, So, but the idea is to have it screened in different places where people can learn. The bottom line of it is when people come together for an economic purpose that benefits everybody, so you have to come together for an economic purpose and it has to benefit, then it's much easier to get over what divides you, right? You're united by something. You're all doing something constructively together. And what you can do in different places is different. Coffee grows there. In other places you can have different kinds of resources. So it is really important to get that message out.
Not everybody was able to buy a bag of coffee. They wanted to know, where do they get this coffee?
Okay, really important. So actually the church can even set up a system if you'd like, that's up to you, with Thanksgiving coffee. There are churches that do that, and then people can actually buy from the church. So that's one possibility. Otherwise, thanksgivingcoffee.com. And by the way, this is not their only co-op. They work with about 7 co-ops around the world, some in South America also. Almost all of them are cause coffees. To give you an example, in Rwanda, there's a guerrilla poaching problem. And they find that in some of the local areas, if the coffee farmers are doing well economically, there's much less poaching of guerrillas, right? If you can get by and make a living, then you don't care about doing that. So that's another type of cause. There are a lot. This is one example of a cause, but there are other causes.
I think we need to recognize the fact that both of you are doing a tremendously important job. And it's very great. In fact, the other question I wanted to ask is more or less along the line that you just mentioned. I wanted to know if there are any other business following the same type of model that you know of. Because I think this is a very good model for many businesses.
Yes, it's a very good model. It's a really important model. Once in a while you hear little stories. I don't know of, like for example, the one in...
There's an olive oil one.
Yeah.
For our angel market. There's an olive oil cooperative from in Israel, between Israelis and Palestinians, that you will see in our angel market when they sell the bottles of olive oil.
Yeah. There are good initiatives that people are doing. I think often they're very small initiatives. And this one was very small also. I mean, it's still small. It's still a small group of farmers, although it's spreading. But we found them, because we got that little packet of information, and because it was a good time for us, because obviously making a documentary requires a vast amount of time and energy and effort. And in terms of who we are, we also get really connected to the people that we work with. So we're not the kind who goes in and does a documentary and, oh, it's past, gone, what's the next one? It's something that, we've been working on in a way since 2005, together with a few other projects. But when you get the right project at the right time and you can put it all together, then you have the opportunity to get the message out. By the way, we're now working with a distribution company in San Francisco. And they're, as many of you probably know, it's very hard to distribute documentaries. It's hard for anybody to make money. We've lost a lot of money on this so far. But if everybody's successful, the more success there is for everybody, the more that can be done in 100 different ways, right? So one of the things that they're doing, they just hired an interfaith coordinator, which I really love the idea, because the kind of enthusiasm that you guys have, I think that there would be people in churches across the country that would share your enthusiasm and want to be part of the message. Yeah, let's go around.
So you said this documentary was shown in a festival in Turkey.
Yes.
How was it received in Turkey? That's an interesting venue for that.
Yes, it's a very one. I mean, we weren't there because they weren't paying for us to be there. So I could only hear back the feedback from the organizers of it, and they said that it went over very well. It's a really. I have a friend in New York who's we live bi-coastally, we're in New Jersey and in West Hollywood. And in New York, I have a friend who's a filmmaker who's from Cameroon. So for example, she said she wants to take this film to Cameroon and, you know, show it in an audience there for tribal differences. You know, the point is, this is interfaith, it's religious differences, but it doesn't really matter if it's tribal or religious or racial or, you know, whatever kinds of differences it has. The point is that people can find ways of bridging their differences and moving to a higher level. And then have that be a fantastic example to everybody else.
And you know, some people say, well, that's so idealistic and all that. Oh, isn't it great they're having peace and they get along? But you know, when you really walk around and see the bond and friendship that all these guys have together, these farmers who I will call them my friends, and you know, a really good relationship. But before this cooperative happened, they would be like irritated, be like, I'm not going to go to that guy's house, he eats pork, or I'm not going to go to this guy's house, he eats the so-and-so. And by bridging these little differences and just saying, you know, we're going to put coffee in a bag, and I'm going to be able to buy a tin roof for my house, or I'm going to double my income. Like, it's okay, whatever you want to. I mean, I've ridden around with these guys on Ramadan. They're trying to like not eat. They will not eat during the day, and they will not drink during the day. But everybody else is there. At the end, when the sun goes down, you know, we're drinking water. And when another holiday is coming out for some other group, everybody recognizes and respects it. Nobody's saying, "Oh, you drink water." There's just a camaraderie and understanding that's, even if one little thing is bridged, and you say, "Wow, you know, it's a human being. It's not just that." The other people over there, you know, neighbors there are very close. Over here can be a farm that has, you know, a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew, and these people all like walk by and they see each other, but for the longest time they wouldn't talk with each other. It was like, oh, the despicable ones over there, or the despicable ones over, and now that it's kind of like. And when I first watched how this was all going down, when I first started filming there was a sense of like, oh, I might, like the woman said, oh, JJ, he's just trying to do the hustle here on us. But now it's like everybody has this, like, it's a community that's come together, is what it is. And what they have in common, you know, they watch each other's kids as they go down. It's no longer like I can't hang out with them. I understand that he's got his own thing that he practices. I respect that, and you know, I think we talked earlier about extreme dogmatism, you know, and how it can, you know, in any faith can just drive you crazy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it sounds a little bit like what was done here with Homeboys Industries, right?
Yeah.
Rival gangs working together. Nothing stops a bullet like a job.
Exactly. Nothing stops being angry when you have food in your stomach, because if your baby's going to sleep at night hungry, which sometimes Stephen's kids would, Samuel's kids would, you know, a hungry kid doesn't do much for you. If you're having a little money, you can feed your family, then you're on to the next thing. Let's do something a little creative at the next level now.
By the way, I just want to add that when we were there in March, so remember we started in 2005, so now this is, you know, 8 years later, and driving around the villages there, everywhere we saw tin roofs on houses. So there's the part of the documentary where he's so cute, Awadi, and he says, when it rains, I sleep here, and everybody, he smiles as he says it, so we all smile with him. It's not funny. And it's not funny because when it rains there, it's like monsoon rain, and it's coming through your banana leaf roof, which means that it's filled with little bugs, and you're trying to sleep. You don't sleep all night long. And then when the sun comes up the next morning, you got to be out. You're a farmer, right? You got to be out there. So you're out there again all day under the hot equatorial sun, and maybe it rains again at night, and that happens. So having a roof on your head changes your life. You know, these little things that sometimes we don't think about. But when we drove around this time, almost everywhere we saw were tin roofs. That was amazing. So people say, you know, there are, you know, once you get out into online communities for any issue out there, fair trade, is it really fair, blah, blah, blah. People can debate about anything, but from practical experience, I can tell you these people have roofs over there.
And they have little bits of, some people have now gotten to buy a small solar panel, charges a battery, so you don't have to sit and squint by a little kerosene lamp. And so then your vision down the road 20 years from now, if you make it to that point, if you survive malaria, snakes, you know, just little things that we take for granted. You know, I'm sorry.
Oh, I think there's just one person.
I've got a few questions. Starting off, you were saying earlier, I guess you could say with the volatility of the commodities market, sea market and all that stuff, you were saying that the farmers were, you know, ripping out the coffee. What other forms of cash crops or income would they have?
At that point, the market was so low. This was prior to when we had showed up on the scene. It was when the coffee market was re-emerging there for other crops.
Well, there's a lot of cash crops that they have that they sell locally.
Okay.
So it's not for the international market. So, you know, there are people who live in the nearby city, Mbale, for example, so they're not necessarily farmers. So they'll make, you know, they have local plantains, you know, as he mentioned, Catsup.
Bananas, plantains, avocados, mangoes.
String beans, local.
Yeah, it's not as if the diet is, the diet suffers from animal protein being really expensive. But, you know, you have guys that will buy 10 chickens and convert it to a goat, and then convert 5 goats into a cow. And, you know, there's outside groups called the Heifer the International that is a great thing they're doing. You get a cow and, you know, you can produce but for the cash crops, international stuff, the only thing I know that they're exporting that anybody really buys is vanilla, chocolate, and coffee.
And most of chocolate is cacao, actually. It's mostly grown in Western Africa, like you read about it in Ghana, and there are fair trade cooperatives, and I think there's some interfaith efforts also with some of these chocolate efforts. So JJ, when we were there, I guess 3 years ago, he took us back to his farm. He has this incredible, his yard just roams, and he said, I'm growing my first cocoa plant. He said, because I was doing the math, and I realized that the cacao tree grows 6 times as many beans for the one tree as the coffee. So you need that many fewer plants, and then it yields that much more money. So he started to do that, and again, it takes another, you know, number of years to mature and to get the bean and all of that. So he was actually just now back 3 years later, it's really starting to grow, and they're really going to start producing that. And the other farmers take his lead, right? He's a leader of the group. He's doing it. It's growing. That he's going to get money for it. You know, they established a market in vanilla with another fair trade buyer in the United States. Now they have connections in the United States. So one talks to the next, they find different buyers in different places who have these products. This is actually a guy in Newark, New Jersey, who buys the stuff. And vanilla also is very expensive. Coffee is very labor intensive. Very labor intensive, but so is, I mean, in the end of the day, so is coffee. All the, you know, this is the thing is, this is how it actually works from the farmer's viewpoint. If this room is my farm, that means it's my yard, right? So I planted rows of coffee trees, maybe 12, 15 rows going down.
Underneath banana trees.
Underneath the trees, right? And then every day, when it's in season, you start to see the beans are ready. They're ripe when they're red. So it's just like tomatoes. They're green for a while, and suddenly they get red. And you know when you go out to get your tomato, and it's like, this is the day. Yesterday wasn't, and tomorrow won't be. It's too late, right? Today's the day. Well, it's the same with coffee beans, except there's thousands of them, right? And it's really hot outside, and it's really hard work. So you go down plant by plant. This one, only this bean, and this bean, and this bean, all right. This plant, this bean, this bean, this bean. So your whole day you can spend doing that. So the difference, as an FYI, between really good coffee and less good coffee, well, there's a number of differences. It's the kind of coffee you have, the genus, how it was planted, if it's on a hill, how high it is, if it's under a tree. Putting all of that aside, once you actually get to the bean itself, if somebody is going in plant to plant and mixes the green with the red and then depulps it all in his or her own home and gives the shelled beans over. No one ever really knows whether it was green or red, right? So the reason the farmers built that depulping facility that you saw is that the farmers are now required to bring their red beans to the co-op, and they will process it. And if they open it up and it's green beans, it's rejected. So the quality of this coffee, every single one of the beans has been picked red. Lots of hard work on the part of the farmers.
And there is not a machine that can pick Arabica coffee without nobody can afford it if there were. But the difference between the Arabica and the Robusto can go out in the sun and you can pick it when it's green, you can shake it with the machine and it all falls out. Well, these guys have shade-grown Arabica, which is like a really, as Ben describes it, it's an old variety. It has a real distinctive taste about it, and it's really, I would not want to be a coffee farmer. I mean, I would go inside a field, and the guy would only be taking 10 beans off the tree because they're red, and I know he has to go back again next week, so you have to visit the little babies in your garden at least 5 or 10 times throughout the growing season. Then there's 2 growing seasons. You have a short season where you get the fly crop, and it's just really labor intensive. I'm so glad I wasn't.
Well, let her question will come right back to you.
I'm just curious, you've noticed in 8 years the difference in quality of life with the roofs on the homes. Have you noticed a difference in access to medical care and education?
Okay, great questions. Okay, so education, absolutely. So in Uganda, even though there's public, and a lot of Africa, I don't know about South Africa for this, but certainly for a lot of Africa, there are public schools, but to go to the public schools, you have to pay for the books and the uniforms. Okay, now if you are a farmer who's living a very agrarian lifestyle, hasn't had much of an education yourself, you have these big families. It's actually, tribally, the more kids you have, the more power you have, all of these things. It's only in the last number of years people are learning that maybe that's not such a good idea, have fewer, smaller families. But, so imagine you have 10 kids in a family. That's not even including like JJ's that has 29 because, he adopts all these kids. But he takes them on really and takes the responsibilities of those kids. So he would send them all to school. So now you have all these kids. You're a farmer. You're hardly making enough money. In dry season, you have to afford to pay for your food you have to buy, let alone anything that's necessary, right? Mosquito nets for your home, mattress for the kids, whatever it is, and then pay for books for all those kids, and then pay for uniforms. Really, really hard to do. So for a long time, they weren't even sending their kids to school, or they send them sporadically.
Yeah.
And you don't, it's not like here you go, first grade is, September to June or whatever, right? It's X number of terms. So if you can go the first term, you go the first term. You can't go the second term, you take off the second term. Maybe you can go back next year after you have that second term, then you graduate.
So erratic.
Yeah. So like one of our, our favorite friends there is this woman named Sanina. She was in the documentary. She's 27 years old, and she graduated high school 2 years ago. She's really smart, and she then went on to college. She's in a college program right now. But I mean, it took her till like 25 to get past all of those grades. So, but having said that, the first time we went to Uganda, everybody said, can you help us for money for our kids to go to school? And of course, there are still private schools, a lot of Christian schools. There are some Muslim schools. I think there's one Jewish school. But there's so few Jews, actually, that it's pretty interfaith school with a Jewish bent to it, I would say. But, so people want to send their kids to those schools. Some of them are. Some of them are able to do what that one farmer, Jonathan, talked about, which is, I can give you an advance, or you give me an advance, I'll pay you back when I get paid for my crops, especially if you're sending your kid out of the area. In the area they would understand, but if you're sending your kid to a private school in Kampala, you have to pay on a farmer's schedule. It's a little less understanding, but they're doing much better with it. Nobody was asking us for money for the kids. That I found amazing. So yes, everybody's doing better. The first thing they do with their money is send their kids to school.
Yeah, because I'm always the skeptical optimist, I suppose. So I was thinking, oh, well, they're going to get this money, and what are they going to do? Is somebody going to go buy a little Boda Mosa going to? He said, no, I want the money to send my kid to school. It was like, that's honorable, because you're going to educate your child, you're taking this money and you want your child to do better. We all do want our children to do better than we do, hopefully, but not saying, well, I'm going to go buy this, I want to buy something that I really don't need. It's like I'm buying an education, which is...
Yeah, and then just to finish up with that thought on the question of the health care. So one time JJ was doing a trip in the US. Oh, okay. Thank you. One time JJ was doing a trip in the US. He was brought here by the Thanksgiving coffee company, and he stayed at our house in New Jersey for a little while. He walked in the door and he was skinnier than this. And I said to him, what's the matter? He said, I just got over my 3rd bout of malaria. Everybody there has had malaria. And what happens with malaria? You get it, and you need to hydrate yourself right away because your temperature spikes from normal to 106 in minutes, right? That's the danger of it. So you need to be hydrated, but if you don't have clean water available there, what are you going to do, right? So it's issues like this. So one of the things, so JJ worked with some people, and some of the folks that I mentioned from Chicago who are working there helped, and an organization also in San Francisco helped and built a clinic nearby. So that's a little bit better, but it's just farmland, it's rural. So you're miles away on a dirt road. Where are you going to go from one to the other? So his big goal was to buy a car. And when we were there last time, we finished it, we're always there. Friday we go to the mosque for services, Saturday is the synagogue, and Sunday is the church, right? When we finished in the mosque, we went outside and we were just interviewing a few people of their lives and blah, blah, blah. And these women who had attended in the mosque said, JJ helps us anytime we have a need. My son was sick and I called JJ. Because they all have cell phones. And he's the ambulance. So there's a car with an ambulance in the name of JJ. And this is why one leader, you do have to worry when somebody's not there, what's the succession plan?
I mean, how can JJ fulfill all these roles? I don't understand how he can do it.
Because he knows how to, JJ knows how to delegate.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, when you manage people, and if you're a good manager, you can say, I need you to do this, this, that. JJ has people that work on his Shamba farm, and JJ will say, okay, now we need to dig. Today we're going to go down, all 5 of you go there and dig it out. He has enough where he has wherewithal to keep people employed, but he also knows how to bring people together. I mean, he can bring a group together and say, this is what needs to be done. Yeah, and sometimes he does get over his head. I mean, this is a Renaissance man in Uganda. He'll sit down in the middle of, come out of the field, his wife's sitting there cooking, and he picks up the guitar and just, starts playing with the kids. And he's quite entertaining.
What happens if they lose that one charismatic character?
You have the characters like Sanina who will, the younger leadership. There are other people. Nobody,
There's a board. They do have a board.
Yeah, the board is.
And as part of an international fair trade organization, there are requirements that the co-op has to adhere to. So it has to have a board. The board has to be gender balanced. Very important in a lot of places in the world. They also have to contribute to local community projects. So with the small amount of money they're making, so even though it's great that they're fair trade, let's to be honest, it's still no money, right? It's still very, very little. It's much better than what they had, but much better is still a standard of living that's extremely low. But from all the money the co-op gets, they have to contribute some of that to a local community project. So this co-op decided a lot of their kids, for example, go to this particular public school where, nearby where a lot of the farmers are located, and they built an entire wing onto that public school for more kids to go. So there are requirements, and all of that is really important. And there's a board. And so JJ, in the last election, I don't know, I don't know the inside of what went on, but somebody else, Stephen, who was in the documentary, he was talking about the start of Christianity in Uganda. If you remember him, he looks like a bit of an older man. He's now the co-op chair, and JJ is not. Now, I don't know if that's because JJ didn't want to be. He's got so many other things going on. He's still on the board, but it is a process of, this is a co-op, and there are other people who can be leaders, and everybody hopes it'll continue for a very long time to come.
I think it's interesting that the CEO of Thanksgiving would get on board on this project. I was buying Thanksgiving coffee in Jacksonville, Florida, in an upscale department store in the 70s.
Yay! Good for you!
And metallic packaging with the cornucopia, flavored coffees, but now to see this CEO step up and do this, what portion of proceeds is actually that goes to Thanksgiving coffee?
I don't remember what the breakdown is. Thanksgiving coffee, and Paul Catsup is amazingly special. He actually was fighting for the Sandinistas back in the whole issue in Nicaragua back then. He's been involved. He gets involved with his heart in the projects he undertakes, which I really appreciate. He has like 7 co-ops. He's not trying to do 150 all over, and really not. He wants to know the farmers. He wants to know what they're doing. He wants to play a really active role in helping them move to the next phase. So you saw the one scene in the documentary where you had Ben from Thanksgiving with the farmers in Uganda. This should be a collaborative effort, right? We're all, and this is one of the things that Paul is really working toward also, that the farmers, I also have a vision of, putting together something where the farmers could actually be here for a little while, learn about their consumers, teach their consumers, then take the knowledge of that back to Uganda, right? Because in the end of the day, we're dependent. Let's face it, right? Coffee's a drug, or many of us are addicted. So is chocolate. Exactly. All the good things in life, So it's very, who are these people who are producing our coffee? It's really important, Spiros has a group called enjoyyourcoffee.net. For anybody who wants to, and his idea is to connect all the coffee drinkers around the world, because people worldwide drink this. And it's a beautiful idea. You should be able to go anywhere in the world, find people who are doing this. We did it last year in Finland, and met people and can share all of this. Well, guess what? At the bottom of all of this is the coffee producers. We don't know them, and they don't know us. We don't know their lives, and they don't know our lives. When they first came here for this tour around the States that Thanksgiving sponsored and Tufts University sponsored also, JJ had been here before. He came with 3 other farmers. One of them was Samuel, right? JJ, because he's a prankster also, personality-wise, they get to Penn Station in New York, and there's a little escalator. Samuel had never seen an escalator.
Right.
So he takes them, it's one going down, he takes them to the up and says, okay, you take that. Of course Samuel's like, what am I doing? This is not a world they know, and that's a really simple thing, right? Any more than we know their world. So I do love, this just goes to how the importance for Thanksgiving of bringing these worlds together. And they're doing this in a lot of different places, and I appreciate that Paul took the project on. Now Paul, they're the biggest employer in Fort Bragg also. To be honest, it's like a very bare bones business. So I don't know exactly how much they're taking. This is not a, it's a business where the people who work there have been working there their entire lives. It's the mainstay of that company. So you're supporting them. It's supporting the farmers in a lot of other places in the world. I've actually never met anyone as pure as Paul in terms of living out his ideology, ever.
So he's been around a long time,
He's been around, for decades.
Yeah. As much as, I don't take my coffee for granted. I'm not saying a coffee snob, but I don't. When I get up in the morning and I have a cup of coffee, I understand where it comes from, and I understand the difficulty that it takes to do it. There's a great book that's called The History of Coffee. It's by a guy named Pendergrass, And Paul's actually mentioned in the book. Coffee started in Ethiopia, you know, it only grows between the two tropics, and so if we ever, we're really hosed if their coffee supplies get, because we really can't grow it here in an effective way.
Well, Kurt's growing it in New Jersey.
And Spiros is growing.
Spiros is growing one in Santa Monica. It just started. It's that big. It's really cute. So check back in 5 years.
Yeah, when we get all 3 beans off of it. You know, they say it takes 72 beans to make a cup of coffee. And
Wow.
so when I started reading this book, when we got interested in the film, just, you know, I had to explain to my son many years ago the economics of a cup of coffee, why I was willing to pay $1.25 for something, and then I saw the documentary about black gold, about the coffee, and the guy comes back to his village and explains to somebody that this coffee costs $2.50, and they're going, we're only making that a pound. And I had to explain to my son when we watched the documentary that, you know, there's economics. Paul has to pay for the electricity up there. JJ has to pay for the electricity. The boat captain that's bringing it over on a ship has to pay for the, you know, the crew's meal. The propeller had to be paid when it had to be. There's a lot of, you know, the cup and the ink and, you know, the whole economics of it don't have to go down the list, but you know, it costs a lot of money to get it here, and you know, it's to get it to us. No, I don't want to be. I want to be in the consumer end of it, not in the production end.
Yeah,
So I like what you said about how you took the coffee for granted before, and how, I guess my question is, how has this experience touched your life personally, and how you see your faith or yourself in the world? How have things shifted?
I'll speak and then I'll let Ellen. For me, like I said, I was always that skeptical optimist, but having seen war zones and everything else, but this one was like, there's a lot of places in the world I've been and a lot of places I've checked off the bucket list, and like I always want to go back to Uganda and just see this cooperative and these people, and it's changed my life. It gives me, I guess in some ways, it has made me a believer that when people have little ideas and they want them to happen and they make them happen, that, you know, if you attack something with a voracious appetite, you will eventually succeed. I mean, JJ, who would have ever thought JJ sitting inside his little hut, being a coffee grower, and somebody had an idea, and if Paul wasn't part of this chain, or this other chain, if I weren't part of this chain, and Ellen, you wouldn't be hearing this story today, you might not be buying a coffee, and, you know, we're all, we have to see ourselves as we're all part of this interconnected thing, and it's really, and it's not utopian, it can be done. I mean, just, you know, respecting where it comes from and knowing that these guys are getting up there. Somebody in Colombia is doing the same thing, somebody in Brazil is doing the same thing with a real, and they're feeding their family with what we just like, okay, give me my cup of coffee, blah, 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 blah. But you know, it's, I guess we need to have respect for like everything that we consume. I mean, whether it's the clothing that's made in foreign countries that, you know, might not be made through some sort of fair trade thing, or, you know, where I get my meat, my vegetables and all this, you know, it's like if we took a broader conscience instead of taking it all for granted, maybe that's what I'll only speak for myself, you know, it's, has me a bigger respect for what I'm buying, and yeah, it's.
And I think it was great, and I agree. And I would say one other thing: it's a reminder that each of us has the power to do something.
Amen.
We each have the power to say yes. You know, I'm going to open my heart to that, and sometimes it's really small. You know, you buying a pound of coffee. If you go to Pete's or to Starbucks, you're going to pay the same price as this coffee. And of course, we're partial to this coffee, but there are, as I said, other Thanksgiving coffee, other coffee buyers also sell coffees that are really helping people, that are playing a role. If these farmers are benefited, and I'm sorry, let me go back 1 second. 3 years ago when we were there, we screened this documentary for the farmers. One of the farmers had a friend who was visiting from another co-op, just coincidentally was in town that day. He came to see it. He walked out and he said, I'm bringing this back to my co-op. We're going to do the same thing. So for each little success, for the dollars that you're spending And that's all it is, right? You're going to buy coffee anyway, unless you don't drink coffee. Most of us are going to buy coffee.
You're going to have a headache if you don't have it.
But if you're doing something that is, in this little way, making a difference, then you're taking the story to your friends, to your other friends, to the other organization you belong to your family at Thanksgiving, to whoever it is. You're spreading the message. You know, that message is getting out. Other farmers are seeing that it's successful. They want to be a part of success. Piece together brings success. Let's do it. And let's do it in Uganda with coffee, and let's do it in, you know, Israel, West Bank with olive oil, and let's do it in South Africa with wine. You know, let's do it wherever, whatever the resources are. We all can do it. It's in our power.